Fort Macomb is a 19th century United States brick fort in Louisiana on the western shore of Chef Menteur Pass. It is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The fort is adjacent to the Venetian Isles community, now within the city limits of New Orleans. Chef Menteur Pass is a water route from the Gulf of Mexico to Lake Pontchartrain and the lakeshore of New Orleans. The other route is the Rigolets. Both straits connect Pontchartrain to the Gulf via Lake Borgne. An earlier fort at the site was called Fort Chef Menteur. The United States built the current brick fort in 1822, just 7 years after the British forces invaded the New Orleans area from the sea at the close of the War of 1812. It was named Fort Wood in 1827 and renamed Fort Macomb in 1851 for General Alexander Macomb, former Chief of Engineers and the second commanding general of the United States Army. The small fort, shaped like a pie wedge, has a curved front facing the channel. The curve overlaps the two straight walls, forming demi-bastions. At the salient of the two straight walls is a full bastion facing landward. The fort was surrounded by two wet ditches, called moats, with extensive outworks between the ditches. On the parade stands a citadel, a defensive barracks. A Louisiana garrison took control of and occupied the fort in 1861, early in the American Civil War. In 1862, the Union Army regained control of the fort and also occupied New Orleans. In 1867, the barracks caught fire, after which the fort was largely abandoned by the U.S. Army and was decommissioned in 1871. The fort and its land are now owned by the state of Louisiana. While some efforts were made to open it to limited tourism in the late 20th century, the decaying condition of the fort was judged too hazardous for public visits. The similar but better preserved Fort Pike, some 10 miles away at the Rigolets, is a regional coastal fort that is open to visitors. Well, now it's closed. Now it's closed for budget reasons. A portion of the fort's old moat has been turned into a canal, which became part of a small marina. The wakes from incoming and outgoing boats were wearing away at the wall of the fort and accelerating structural damage. Hurricane Katrina destroyed the marina in 2005. The fort is now protected by riprap. It needs structural stabilization to reverse the previous damage. The fort's been used in several films and TV shows. One was the first season finale in 2014 of True Detectives. It was also used for television Into the Badlands in 2015. In 2016, Beyoncé filmed portions of her critically acclaimed visual album Lemonade at Fort Macomb. And episode 17 of season 4, NCIS New Orleans, used the location for a concluding scene. So let's find out who this General Macomb is, because he actually has a lot of history behind him as well. Alexander Macomb was the commanding general of the United States Army from 1828 until his death in 1841. Macomb was the field commander at the Battle of Plattsburgh during the War of 1812, and after the stunning victory was lauded with praise and styled the hero of Plattsburgh by some of the American press. He was promoted to Major General for his conduct, receiving both the thanks of Congress and a Congressional Medal. Born in the British-held Detroit in 1782, Macomb was the son of Alexander Macomb, a merchant and fur trader from upstate New York, and Mary Catherine Navarre, who was of ethnic French descent. In 1798, at the age of 16, Macomb joined a New York militia company. In 1799, with the recommendation of Alexander Hamilton, he was commissioned a cornet in the regular army during the French emergency. For 5 years, Macomb directed construction of coastal fortifications in the Carolinas and Georgia. He also established fortifications at Fort Horatio, Michigan, Chicago, Mackinac, Prairie du Chien, St. Peter's, and St. Mary's in what was considered the Northwest area, Michigan and Illinois. At the beginning of the war in 1812, in July of 1812, Macomb was promoted at the age of 30 to colonel of the newly organized 3rd Artillery Regiment. He won acclaim during the War of 1812 as Brigadier General in command of the Right Division of the Northern Army, responsible for defending the frontier of northern New York at the Battle of Plattsburgh in 1814. With only 1,500 regular troops and some detachments of militia, he was opposed by a British force of 10,531 men under Lieutenant General Sir George Prevost. In the weeks leading up to the battle, Macomb, knowing full well he would be greatly outnumbered, worked with his men to move trees and create fake roads in order to obscure the genuine roads and lead the British into dead-end traps far from their 3 nearby American forts, a maneuver Macomb called abattis, A-B-A-T-T-I-S. The British attack was diffused by these efforts. The long, narrow lines of marching soldiers were unable to easily stop and about face. They became entangled in the narrow false road maze, where they became targets for the American ambush. When Major General Brown, the Army's commanding general, died in February of 1828, Macomb was the senior brigadier general on the Army Register, although as the Army's chief of engineer, he was paid only at the rank of colonel. President John Quincy Adams promoted him to commanding general of the Army with the rank of major general. The general's last service was in the theater of war at the Seminole War in Florida in 1835. In 1809, Macomb was the author of the seminal book, published in 2006, on martial law and conduct of court-martial. It was the first book written on the American procedures during this period. He was serving as an advocate judge, JAG, in the Army. He published a revised, updated book solely on court-martial in 1809. He is memorialized by several monuments. One statue of Macomb was sculpted and erected in 1906 in downtown Detroit, Michigan. This statue was made from melted-down cannons and was a notable and monumental task. Another is in downtown Mount Clemens, Michigan, in front of the Circuit Court building.